So much of what edge rushers do is graded on their pass rush, sacks, pressures, but God, there's just so much more to this beautiful, beautiful position than that. Let's go deep on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate you so very much. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today on the show, I want to talk about the edge rusher position. And the reason I'm doing this stems from a lot of the discussion that I got into online about Jared Verse, who has a great game against the Eagles, ultimately came up short. But Jared Verse had a great game, got picked 2 picks after Dallas Turner, and everyone's talking about it. And my main point was, hey, Jared Verse isn't a coverage player. He's a power rusher. He's like, what he does is completely different from what the Vikings ask of their edge rushers. And I was surprised to see how much pushback that I got on that opinion. And I started realizing, instead of sitting here and keyboard warrioring all day, it's a good excuse to sort of lay out what the edge rusher position, at least in a 3-4 defense like the Minnesota Vikings, is for. And I'm using edge rusher. You can use it interchangeably with outside linebacker. I just think using the word linebacker for this position, because this is primarily a defensive line player that is up on the surface of the defense, is just, I don't know, feels misleading. So I'll call them edge rushers. And if defensive ends or outside linebackers, they all rush the edge. So I want to go over what is asked of that position. And this isn't going to be an episode that is primarily dedicated to like defending the choice of Dallas Turner over Jared Verse. There will be some of that. And I do think that going back in hindsight, seeing that Jared Verse got more pressures and being like the Vikings made the wrong choice is at best reductive, and at worst just flat out kind of wrong. But like that'll come through in some of this. I'll defend that a little bit. Like I'll explain that take a little bit, but that's not going to be the primary goal here. The primary goal here is going to be to learn the position of edge rusher. What do we want our edge rushers to do? Yes, we want them to rush the passer, but that is a small fraction. That's their third down role, right? That's their role against straight dropbacks with no potential run action or anything like that. And you don't see offenses do that a lot on neutral downs. They run the ball, they fake the run a lot. Like, this is the modern day and age. Nobody's just doing straight dropbacks all day long, right? So what they do on those plays is also going to be important. And what an edge rusher is like coached to do, what an edge rusher wants to do is as much a part of the formula as someone's athleticism, their arm length and their 3-cone time and all those other things that we'll get so into. Plus, it's draft season. And so even though the Vikings probably are not going to be looking at any edge rushers in this draft, it's still going to be a topic of conversation that flitters across your consciousness. So still good to kind of talk about. And then like the differences between a guy like Verse and a guy like Turner are really interesting. Plus, I think looking at that Eagles-Rams game and how it ended really put a highlight on some of those extra factors about an edge rusher, in particular stuff on the backside that I pointed out about Jared Verse going into the Vikings-Rams game and saying, hey, this stuff might be exploitable. And the Vikings didn't exploit it, and the Eagles very much did. And we'll get to it, but it turned out to be really decisive. That's not me trying to say Verse is a bad player, by the way. If there's any like Rams fans hate listening or whatever, I'm not trying to evaluate either of these players. There are just differences. And comparing and contrasting those differences can be instructive to us learning the position. So let's learn the position. Let's start where everybody wants to start, which is the pass rush, and we'll get to the meat and potatoes of it all later. But to me, pass rush, it gets the most attention, I think, because it's the flashiest, right? Sacks are very fun. They get you money. but it also is the most visible thing. It's the easiest thing to find, so it's the thing that's going to get talked about the most. To me, pass rushing, it reminds me of like a trading card game where you've got your deck of moves, you've got your arsenal, your repertoire of things you know how to do, and those things are however good you are at spins or swims or two-hand swipes or whatever you want to do. And how you deploy those, when you choose to deploy those, and how good you are at executing them is going to match up with how well an offensive lineman, and their repertoire of pass sets and, hand moves and deflections and how good they are at executing their stuff. And it's going to kind of come down to all of that. That is the one-on-one, I'll call it the Senior Bowl version of pass rushing, where everyone just sets up, you're doing drills, and, I'm across from you, I got to beat you. And schematically, if you're really, really good at that part, like you're Jonathan Grenard, then teams can sort of try to scheme up ways to put you in those one-on-one situations and hope that you can just go eat. But a lot of pass rush, I've said this a lot about Dallas Turner, a lot of pass rush is sacrificial, and there are kind of extra goals, bonus objectives, if you will. Your goal is to get to the quarterback, of course. But then there's like a side goal of, I just want to peel this tackle away from the slide. So I just got to make sure I go upfield a lot. Maybe on another play, your goal is to crash really hard into the center. And if I get to the quarterback, I get to the quarterback. But my goal is really to crash the center really hard because I've got a blitzing linebacker coming in and I want to open up a hole for him. Especially in third down worlds where you aren't looking at the run at all. There's no reason to even read if there's a run play because it's 3rd and 12. Those jobs become a lot more dynamic and complicated and rich and interesting. And it's where you kind of get a lot of your money as a pass rusher. So for Dallas Turner, I've spoken quite a bit on the issues I have with this part of his game. When he came out, he's a leverage winner. He's a skinnier player. You can see it. And as a skinnier player, that means you got to beat dudes that are bigger than you. There's 2 ways to do that. One is to be quicker, duck underneath, be like a feisty little twerp that gets up and around and spins and does all this crazy stuff. Or you can be a leverage player. Because I can get, if I have leverage on a guy who's 75 pounds heavier than me, I'm going to be able to move that guy. That's just physics. Dallas Turner was really good at that physics and not so much at the quick game, even though he is athletic enough to be that guy. It's just not how he would win in college. And the Vikings had him going up and around quite a bit. That might have been in service of grander pass rush plans. It's pretty hard to tell, and I can't really know without being in the room, so we just kind of have to say maybe that was the case and set it aside. But what that meant was that he was trying to dip and bend around the edge. That's never been his game. And the Vikings asked him to do that. Now, is that the Vikings being bad coaches and asking him to do something he's not good at? I don't think so. I think he's 21, and I think in the NFL, you have to have that aspect of your game. You have to be able to dip around a slow tackle. And so they're developing that when they can, having him learn how to do that and accepting the growing pains that come. And this is the part where we kind of have to slow down and ask what our expectations are. And this is a hard conversation to have with Dallas Turner. What should Dallas Turner be doing in his rookie year? What do we want from him? It's an important question, and I think it's one we all kind of skip the answer to and assume we all have the same one, and we don't. So we'll get into that value conversation next, and then we'll get into some of the more nuanced responsibilities in the run game and play action and all that stuff. All right, sound good? We'll see you there. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. If you're looking to grow your small business in 2025, I imagine you are, it's probably going to come down to how well you hire, especially right now, first quarter, beginning of the year. That's where LinkedIn comes in. They have the strongest hiring data available that can help you make good decisions that are right for you and your business and its unique needs. Each business, whether it's small or a bigger firm and you run like HR for it, all has their own unique needs, company culture, things they ask for from a position, not unlike an edge rusher. LinkedIn Jobs is a game changer when it comes to hiring the right fit. In fact, 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn has helped them find high-quality candidates. From unique skills and interests to the connections you share, LinkedIn helps you find the right person for the job. So hire smarter this year and find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. It is playoff time. And guess what? We, as Vikings fans of an NFC North team, I don't think we have any more hate watches, unless you're like still mad at the Eagles for 2017. But otherwise, it's like we're all like kind of neutral on it. Maybe you're still mad at the Commanders for 1987. I would respect it. Or maybe the Chiefs, if you're really old, for 1969. Go Bills. Whatever it is, if you are like me and you don't really have like a stake in any of these games anymore, PrizePicks is for you. All you got to do is pick more or less on player stats like Saquon Barkley, 99.5 rushing yards, for more or less. That's all you got to do. Pick 2 to 6 of those and you can win up to 1,000 times your money. You can cash out your picks in 60 seconds. If you win, PrizePicks has you covered. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it is clear that people are having a great time. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. If you want to see me show my work a little bit on my Dallas Turner stuff, I have made so much content about Dallas Turner. Focusing on the first round draft pick was one of my main goals of this entire season. So I wrote a big long article on him over at Wide Left. And I made a bunch of Patreon videos, including one that I made about him pre-draft, one that I made about him after the preseason, one that I made after his first game, and then periodically throughout the season, including one stretch where I made a video about him 3 weeks in a row. If you want to know what Dallas Turner has been doing beyond just some snap counts, go check that out. I will link the thread, a Twitter thread with all of those links in the show notes. So you can just go browse whichever one you feel like you want to watch at whatever game recap you feel you want to look at. I've broken down in depth just about every snap that Dallas Turner has had. So there's no excuse, okay? There's no excuse. You can go look at whatever you want, all of it, some of it, whatever. But if I were to, before this show, go to a random Vikings fan and ask, hey, what do you think about Dallas Turner? They'd probably say something about, well, he's not really getting on the field much, or maybe they'd cite, well, he's X'd in rookie snap counts or whatever. And maybe the second most popular answer will be something about how the Vikings overpaid for him. Maybe they paid too much in draft capital. And that's not really the conversation I'm trying to have. Whatever they paid for them, they paid for him, right? He's on the team and it's time to do what's best for him. So for a 21-year-old player with 2 Pro Bowlers in the same position group, what is the expectation that you have for when he's going to get on the field? Should he also be an immediate Pro Bowler? Is that what we have to do? And I genuinely think that you should look in the mirror and ask, am I setting a standard that a 21-year-old rookie needs to be a Pro Bowler in his first year, or I'm going to start criticizing the GM for making a bad pick? If that's the heuristic that you are using, I think you're perhaps being a bit harsh. I think that we can set that expectation a little differently. Now, if your critique is, well, why did you trade so much draft capital for a 21-year-old player? That's an interesting take. And if you want to be somebody that advocates for taking older rookies because they can be more useful to you right away, I think you can maybe craft an argument that starts to be coherent, even though I think a lot of people would disagree with it. Most people advocate for younger players because they tend to develop into better versions of themselves than they were in college. And to compare, again, Dallas Turner to Jared Verse is 24 and Dallas Turner is 21. So a hotter start for the older player is a little bit to be expected. But I kind of feel like nobody's really had like a good, if they're like, he didn't get on the field. Okay, well, there were 2 other Pro Bowlers. And I kind of just hear, yeah, but still. Like, I haven't heard like a good argument there. So if you have one, please let me know. For why it's okay to expect a 21-year-old rookie to take the field over two guys that like made the Pro Bowl and definitely deserved to. All that said, again, expectations. For Dallas Turner and for any rookie, and I think this is a really hard question to answer for any rookie that coaches have to deal with every time there's a draft pick. Do you let him cook as the guy he was in college, or do you put him through a process to try to improve who he is? If you choose the latter, there will be a cost of that player not being as good early. Have you ever tried to learn a new thing? How good are you at it the first few times you do it, right? But that might be worth it. And so the coaches might be making a decision, hey, this guy maybe won't get on the field as much as rookie year, but it's going to pay off. So let's try it, right? That doesn't always explain why a player doesn't get on the field, and it doesn't always work out that way, right? With Lewis Seen, right? It wasn't just that there was a thing we were waiting for him to learn. He never picked it up. It never caught on. And when you change coaching staffs, that plan can be disrupted. And so if Brian Flores goes and takes a head coaching job, managing the Dallas Turner development plan, and, Mekhi Blackmon and everybody on defense that they've drafted in the last 2 years needs to be part of the calculus for choosing who you hire next. How can you keep that on track and not totally disrupt it? Or if you're going to disrupt it, is it worth it? For example, with Donatel, right? Staying in a Fangio scheme just to make it so Lewis Seen would develop a little better probably wouldn't have been worth it. So you have to make those decisions, and obviously firing coordinators is always going to come with that cost. It's never a great place to be, and it's not something you'll ever want to do. But obviously, they had no choice after 2022. Okay, so all of that stuff aside, that's the value question, I guess, and the expectations question. Let's get into a little bit of the run game stuff. So my expectation for Dallas Turner in terms of pass rush, run game, and kind of the physical stuff that I see him do on the field. I'm not sitting here setting a line and saying he's got to have this pressure percentage and play this many snaps or whatever. You can do that if you want. I'm just not interested in it. But instead, I would rather say, well, I would love to see him get a little better at bending the corner. And we did. Go check out my Patreon videos. You can see him get better at it, like in real time. You can see him game over game. Get better at bending around the edge. Get a little bit quicker at it. Get a little bit more violent with his hands. Get better at turning that toe. Okay, that's a big thing that your toe takes you where you want to go. I will harp that at a lot of positions, not just edge rusher. That works for receiver, that works for quarterback in a certain way, that works for linemen. Like if your toe takes you where you want to go, point your feet, everything else will untwist with you. And you saw that bend get a little better, culminating in, I think the best one of his whole season was a sack he got against the Bears, where he bent and dipped under and kind of fell down almost. He bent so hard. That's progress. That's him getting better at the thing. And it's what we wanted to see. One other expectation that I had was I wanted to see him get better at holding his point on the front side of run plays. So let's talk about that now. On the front side of a run play, it's like front side and back side of run plays for an edge rusher are two very different jobs. On the front side, it's a lot more about strength. It's a lot more about power. You are attacking a front side blocker, whether it's a motioning tight end or it's just the offensive tackle coming at you. And you're usually trying to collapse that guy in. Whether it's zone or gap, somebody's probably trying to take you and widen you out, and you're trying to resist that. It's a power game. Or you want to duck that block, defeat that block in some way. On the backside, it's a lot more there's a lot more thinking to it because you're the one that's responsible for the quarterback on a bootleg or a read option. You're the one that has to potentially read that there's going to be a screen away from the running back or something like that. You're the one that has to chase down a cut and squeeze down a cutback lane. So it's a lot more about precision and athleticism and chasing things down. Don't get me twisted. That's not an absolute thing. Okay, it's not that you can be the weakest edge rusher ever and be okay if you just stick to the backside of run plays, or vice versa with the front side. And if if you're strong but you're bad at everything else, you can be a front side. That is not the case. Okay, you need some speed on the front side, you need some strength on the backside, but it's just that there's more of one on one. There's obviously exceptions to all of this, but in Dallas Turner's case, on the front side of an edge rush, he was able to collapse things down a lot better as the season went on. And on the backside, I think that was where he was actually at his best. On the backside of a run where it was where there was a lot of thinking to do. And so the Vikings would put him a lot of the time on the same side of the play as the running back, because that's probably going to be the backside of a shotgun run. The running back's going to cross over the quarterback and go the other way. And what that means is you're not going to get a lot of tackles because most of the runs are going away from you. But they liked the way he squeezed cutback lanes, and I did too. They liked the way that he thought and processed through, reading quarterbacks and giving quarterback, on read option. If you're playing somebody like Lamar Jackson, this is going to be the Vikings with Caleb Williams twice a year now. You're playing somebody like Caleb Williams. You would much rather them give the ball to like a running back they're going to trade later in the season than keep the ball in Caleb Williams' hands on a sprint out or, in some athletic, get him in space and make a guy miss kind of thing. You don't want that, right? That's like the whole strength of him. Instead, just give the ball to DeAndre Swift, who's been bad all year. And so you can manipulate read option that way. So Dallas Turner will do that. He was really consistent about that. It's unselfish. He's never going to show up in the stat sheet, but it works. On the front side, he did get just washed away a few too many times. And I don't want to make this an episode that's like Dallas Turner versus Jared Verse. But Verse is a power rusher, to me, got widened out more than I expected him to when I watched like some of the tape scouting him for the Rams. And those was only a couple games, so maybe I just watched the ones where he was like bad at that and he was off days or something. But it's not like a crazy surprise that I saw some of the same stuff happen in zone runs against the Eagles as well, in a way that the Vikings just weren't able to kind of get their heads out of their asses and do the things they're always good at. But that was much more about the Vikings. And I want to describe some of those things next. So we still got quite a bit to go through on this here on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. You can put it down on anything and even with short odds plays like a Saquon Barkley anytime TD or a Jalen Hurts rushing alt line that's like 10 yards or something like that. Whatever it is, or a same game parlay, or if you just feel really good about a spread, whatever it is, put down $5. You get 300 in bonus bets. 60-1 odds is what that means on anything, even if it's a short odds bet that doesn't give you a lot of juice naturally. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around for your winnings. So whether you are betting on an emotional stake because you really don't like the Eagles, or just kind of looking to have a reason to have a stake in Chiefs Bills, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. There are a few things in the edge rushing world that fall into these more nuanced categories, and especially on the backside. And the way that the Rams used Jared Verse took him away from those nuanced responsibilities a lot. Again, do not get me twisted, okay? That's not a critique of Jared Verse. That is the Rams having a rookie player, and they wanted him to pin his ears back and get stuff done. It's a perfectly viable thing, assuming that you can cover up the deficiencies that you accept when you give him that role. So what the heck am I talking about? On the backside of a zone run. Against a team like the Eagles that are a read option team, you need to have a quarterback responsibility. Most edge rushers are pretty, unless you're a potato, you can do that, right? You can get off the ball, square up and say, I'm going to get the quarterback if you keep the ball, and make him give the ball to the running back. Most edge rushers can do that. And if you screw that up, it's actually kind of a big mistake. The tough part, this is where I think Andrew Van Ginkel is an unbelievably good player. And I actually think Pat Jones is underrated at this, is to give that give read and then go still be useful as in cutting off that cutback lane, right? If you're on the left side and the quarterback would come to the left side if he keeps, so you stay home and you make it so the quarterback gives the ball away to the running back. So he's going to go off to the right. And if that run then cuts back to the left, You can't be sitting there caught in a staring contest with the quarterback going, I did my job, right? You still got to be able to go cut that thing off. Van Ginkel's phenomenal at that. And so it was really hard to cut runs back, except I think the first Lions game, they kind of had a breakdown there that was a problem with something else we don't have to get into. But that job requires a good bit of discipline, timing, and feel. There's also peel rules, which is only in some play calls. It kind of depends on the coverage and what else is going on, but a lot of times it's in man coverage. If you're that backside edge and you're on the running back side, you have to read if the running back is going out for a route. If the running back goes right out to a route in the flat, you have to peel out and run with him and essentially be a man coverage player, or you might even call it the word for some defenses is retrace, where if they feel that it's going to be a screen that way, where if they feel like they got in too easily, or if they feel like, it's whatever screen indicator that they get, they turn around and, run back toward the person who's going to catch the screen, try to run them down. Again, Andrew Van Ginkel, phenomenal at this. However you slice it, that player has to think. They have to read stuff, make quick decisions, and deploy a blend of speed, chase down, athleticism, but also take on tight ends, split flow tight ends that are coming across the side. They have to be able to defeat blocks still like anybody else, but they have to think. And so when I watched the Rams, and this wasn't just Jared Verse, Byron Young did this, everybody did this on that team, Michael Hecht, they would crash it all down. And they would choose against these read options, or it was bootlegs for the teams I was watching, because I was trying to prepare for teams that were more like the Vikings. So I was watching teams that do a lot of bootlegs. Miami, San Francisco. Against those ideas, they would have a linebacker kind of scrape over and then become that like quarterback responsible player. I thought that was really exploitable. And I thought that like that player is probably going to have a coverage responsibility. So if you do a rollout, he might not be able to do both jobs, and you could get him in conflict. You could make something happen. And the Vikings never really found a way to do that. And I was actually pretty disappointed because I thought that it was like an opportunity that they missed. So either I was just wrong about the Rams, which that happens all the time when I do scouting episodes over on Patreon, or I discovered something, but for whatever reason, the Vikings couldn't take advantage of it. And then I saw the Eagles take advantage of it. And it's like, crap, it was there. They did it. But if you watch, you watch two breakaway touchdowns to get this idea. Go watch the first one that was a Jalen Hurts breakaway touchdown. They did read option, but it was counter. So it was, or it might have just been a fake to the running back, counter keep. So Jalen Hurts keeps and has his two lead blockers. And that linebacker that was responsible for taking on the quarterback is now blocked by a puller. You had numbers for him, and you did it. That's not a play the Vikings are able to run. That's not Sam Darnold's not a read option quarterback, right? They're doing different things there. But similar stuff I think could have been possible with like rollouts. Whatever, I'm not mad. But the second play is actually the dagger touchdown. I want to talk to you about that. Saquon Barkley ripping off like a 60-some yarder in the snow to basically put that game away. I want you to look at that. Pause this. Go look at that play. Look it up on YouTube. And watch Jared Verse on. He's at the top of the screen. Watch what he does. He totally runs himself out of the play. He sees that play being a handoff one way, and he starts to scrape over the top of the defensive line to go over that way, ends up totally running himself out of the play, and there's a huge run, huge hole. And so what the Rams didn't want to do was ask their rookie to think. And that's really what I'm getting at. You want one good buzzworthy quote? They didn't want Jared Verse to think all year. They wanted him to pin his ears back and go. No think, just go. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It clearly worked. Jared Verse had a great rookie season. But the Vikings don't want their players to not think, because there's limits to that. If you can't ask Jared Verse to think, then Jared Verse becomes somebody you can attack. And the Eagles proved that. As good of a game as Jared Verse had, he still was the culprit on that dagger touchdown. Like, that is just proof positive of what I'm talking about here. That it is going to get some production, but be exploitable. The Vikings want their guy to think. And that leads me to the final thing, which is coverage. And here's maybe the stat of the day, right? Over the regular season, Dallas Turner covered on 18%. Almost a fifth of the time he was on the field, he was in coverage. And he was great at it. Not only did he get that interception against Seattle, but he dropped like an off-ball linebacker. It was awesome. He was precise. He opened his hips the right way. He was fast. He's got the perfect kind of athleticism for it. He's good at it. Not just for a rookie. He's just straight up good at it. Jared Verse covered on 3% of snaps. Maybe like twice a game. On maybe part of some like fire zone blitz or some kind of like, weird third down packages or something like that. It's not something that's in his repertoire. The Vikings need edge rushers that cover. And I think this is the part that a lot of people balk at. I got a response. Somebody said, well, if your scheme doesn't fit Jared Verse, then your scheme sucks. Okay, man, you're saying that about the Brian Flores thing? Like, he's getting a head coaching job over it. I don't think it sucks. But in a more like logically sound way, the same reasons that make Jared Verse a bad fit for what the Vikings were doing made Andrew Van Ginkel get 2 pick sixes this year and another one coming from Dallas Turner. It made for tons of unblocked players. It made them, one of the most sack-rich teams in the league. It gave them 3 different players that were, top 15 in sacks. So while the cost is, hey, a pure power rusher that doesn't really cover, yeah, that guy's not for us. He's for someone else. And go have fun with the Rams, but we kind of got our guy. And what I guess I struggle to understand is why that's such a bad thing. Why? I mean, I could go the other way and say, well, if Von Miller doesn't fit your scheme, because you're not asking. It's like Von Miller covered, and obviously Grenard and Van Ginkel covers. Like if Andrew Van Ginkel's a bad fit for your scheme, is your scheme bad? He's a Pro Bowler, right? What if another team was like, yeah, we love this Van Ginkel guy, but it doesn't really fit our scheme, and then watched him rack up like 15 sacks all year? Are they going to be mad about it? No, they probably aren't, because they're doing their own thing. And edge rushers and everybody on defense is part of a greater whole. And you have to understand in the context of that greater whole. And here's the hot take, right? And again, this is not me saying Jared Verse is like secretly a bad player. I don't want you to get me twisted. But if Jared Verse were the Viking that they drafted instead of Dallas Turner, he probably doesn't play that much this year. Because he's got to learn how to cover. He's got to learn how to do backside stuff. That's not his thing. The Vikings would have approached that so differently, and we'd be going, wow, why didn't Jared Verse get on the field? Does he suck? We would be saying that because we would have had to teach Jared, completely change the way he plays football. And so that goes back to that age-old question. Do you just let Jared Verse be the guy he was in college, which is what the Rams did, and it did great, or do you angle at something greater? And I can always respect when you bring a player in, look at him and say, this is how I think we get the most out of you. And it means we're going to have to be a little patient, but we can do it. You're doing things the hard way and not the easy way. And hopefully these things pay off. But hopefully you've at least learned something new today, right? That's the goal of the show every day, about how we are evaluating, like what it means to be a scheme fit in Brian Flores' defense. I guess that's the way I should have put this at the beginning. What does it mean to be a Brian Flores scheme fit or not? And looking at the very reasons that Jared Verse was successful tells me that would not have happened here. And if you put Van Ginkel on the Rams, they probably don't do things the same over there either. Like, it just doesn't go across, right? If I work at an office supplies store and I hire a scuba diver, and then I'm going to be like, well, we got to teach that guy how to use the printer. That guy could be the best scuba diver in the world. I didn't make a good hire. So that's all I'm trying to say here. Hey, look, if you want follow-ups on all this stuff, please ask me questions. You can find me. I'll put out a call on probably Blue Sky. I'm not going to be quite as active on Twitter for a little bit. But you can always, if you got a question, you can email me at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com or fill out the Google form, which is in the description to any podcast episode. I will see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skol.